Hmm.
And that taught me a lot of lessons. One is don't try to be like other churches, which I think we were trying to be in those early years. Like, I'm not going to even say names, but the popular churches that you see and hear
Right.
um, locally here in New York, around the country, or even around the world, those global churches. We try to copy a lot of, and we realize we're not meant to copy other churches or ministries. There's a grace on your church to do specific things well. You may not do everything well, but you'll do specific things well because the grace of God is on that. And just hone in on that and just accentuate that and invest into that. So we went through that downturn, like you said, and then we learned, hey, let's be ourselves, let's be authentic. And then we saw, all right, then the climb was not as steep; it was gradual.
Right. Yeah, but and it's probably still there. It stays. It,
Exactly.
you know. Hey, thank you for joining the Revitalized Church Podcast. On this episode, I get to host Pastor Cecil Matthew, the pastor of one church in Elmont, New York. His story involves revitalizing a dying church by transitioning to a multi-ethnic, multi-generational congregation. He has the courage to follow God's leading, and he leads his congregations through these necessary shifts, and now they are a thriving and growing congregation. I hope this episode encourages you to do the same thing, to listen to the Lord and to take that courage and make the necessary transitions that you need to make so that your ministry or your church or whatever God has you leading can be the healthiest possible. So right now, let's jump into the episode with Pastor Cecil Matthew. Hey, Pastor Cecil, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. I've been looking forward to interviewing you. You have an amazing story. We've gone over just a little bit, and so I'm looking forward to all of our viewers and listeners getting to hear that. It's been a joy getting to know you. So, if you don't mind, take just a minute or so, let everybody know who you are, where you're at, where your church is, and just give them a brief history of who Pastor Cecil is and what's going on in your life.
Awesome. Thank you, Pastor William. Thank you for this opportunity. First off, my name is Cecil Matthew, and I get to serve here at One Church in Elmont, New York. We are literally bordering Queens of New York City, but we live on Long Island and pastor here on Long Island. And we are honored to serve this growing multi ethnic, multi generational church. And I'm a husband to a wonderful wife and father to three amazing daughters and girl dad. And excited for the challenges of that, but the beauty of that as well. And just surrounded by a great family, friends here in New York, and also the church here in New York, which is growing and vibrant. And thankful for the opportunity to connect with you and to your audience, and to see if there's a way I could pour back into our community and to your audience, and also just be blessed. And everything that you've been putting out there in terms of the interviews and content has been a blessing to me as well. And at this point, right now, when we're recording, just coming back from our International General Assembly, and what an amazing experience that we both had there, and among so many others. And looking forward to the future of our church, our movement, but also the local church here in New York.
Oh yeah, man, we had a great time. We both got to
Yes.
connect there. So I'm curious, three daughters. What
Yes.
ages are we talking about here? Are they young or?
Yeah, getting young, but getting old fast. 16, 12, and 8. So definitely three different mindsets, three different life stages for them, and trying to manage uh, all three of them in one day is like, hey, very diverse
Oh,
personality.
I've got a 15-year-old daughter that's going on 30. So I know exactly what you're talking about, man. Raising
Exactly,
like
exactly.
I have a son that's 18, and it
Yep.
doesn't even compare to how one is with the other. With my son, I was always
Right.
like, you know what, man, just go ahead. It won't hurt you too bad. With
Yeah.
her, I'll fight you over her.
Yes,
So man,
exactly.
yeah, from one girl dad to another, man. I love,
Uh,
I love being a girl dad.
we'll pray for each other.
Yeah, I'm thankful. I do have my son. I go out and hit golf balls and stuff with him, so I can
Yep.
relate to that.
Yep.
But that's cool, man. I know
Yep.
being a dad and a husband is one of the greatest joys of my life, and it sounds
Absolutely.
like that with you too. So
Absolutely. Yes, it
that's
is.
cool. So tell me a little bit about One Church, where you are now. I know one thing that you have shared is that you're a multi-ethnic, multi-generational church now, and that is something we hear a lot of churches wanting to hit that goal. You know what I'm saying? We push. That's something we push to do, and you have managed to achieve that. Um, I, I want to pick your brain on that because that's something that I want to do. We want to look like our communities. We want to
Yeah.
look like the city around us. Um, has your church always been that way? Like, give me a little history of one church. What was it like, and how did you get to that point to where you are now?
Awesome. No, it did not always look that way. We are just celebrating 50 years as a church. Um, and the cool fact about our church is that for the Church of God denomination here in the United States, I found out that we are the first South Asian Indian American church that was planted here. And how that happened was there was a small group of believers that had migrated from Kerala, India, to the United States, specifically New York, and they were looking for a pastor. And from what I understand, Church of God World Missions and New York Church of God leadership at that time worked together to bring my grandfather from India to the United States, basically as a missionary to plant a church. And that church became the first uh, Church of God congregation for South Asian Indians from Kerala, India. So that's the cool fact about our church. It was started in the heart of Manhattan, then moved to Brooklyn, and then in the late 90s, because of the congregation migrating to the suburbs from the city, we moved our location to where we are now. We've had a total of, I'm the fourth pastor in 50 years, so you can see the longevity in leadership as well. But we were an ethnic church, a native language speaking church for many of those years. And then we had to make a shift in a certain season of our history to, hey, we can't keep going like this. We have to reach the community, but also reach the next generation. And that's where
Hmm.
kind of gave us the catalyst for, hey, let's do something different. Let's be innovative. Let's try something, even if it doesn't work out. Let's do something, and if it does, let's see how God continues to lead us.
Yeah. So when it was like that, you said it was a native language speaking church. You
Hmm.
had, what I'm saying? It was is everybody of one type. That's how so many churches are right now. It's just that monoculture in the church and all of that. What was that conversation like? How was that received? And um, for most of us being wanting to reach out multicultural, the language barriers aren't there either. So we don't have to have, it's a
Yes.
shift, but not that is a major shift for the church to have. What was that conversation like? How did that go?
I think they knew it was there, I think, but it's just a fear of change that we all have in our own personal lives. But then you bring a collective group of people together in a church setting where they're trying to hold on. The immigrant um, culture and mindset is, hey, we want to hold on to what we used to have back home. uh, and they want to
Hmm.
have what they had back home here in the United States. But for someone like me that was born and raised in the United States, and my peers and my generation coming up in the church, we're like, no, life is different. Our schools look different. Our friendship circles look different. Uh, the community looks different. So what we have in a little bubble in a church on Sunday mornings or in our little gatherings is very different than what we experience in our the rest of our lives. So we have to somehow integrate the two without losing our doctrine, without losing our theology, without losing our aspects of what we believe, uh, but also changing the methods and how we can reach the next generation and how we can reach the people of our community.
Yeah. So you said now, I think you told me you were a youth pastor when you kind of helped push for this change. That's you don't always see the change coming from that direction. It's normally from the top down and from the pastor. So that takes some boldness there to be able to bring those things up.
Yep.
And obviously, we're doing it in a respectful way to make that happen. So tell me about how. So you said that this was people that you were already interacting with. You were getting friends and people like that to come.
Yes.
Um, so how did they receive everything? Was the blending? Was there any struggles there? Did everything go pretty smooth? How was that like?
So we essentially started with a small youth group. We're like, all right, let's start with what we can handle. And like you said, I was a youth pastor. Before that, a Sunday school teacher, worship leader, kind of did everything. As a pastor's kid, you're supposed to do or figure out how to do everything.
Right.
And kind of and had that experience But one thing I realized is you don't have to lead from the top or from the front to make change.
That's
And I
good.
want that to come across to everyone in your audience that watches this. If you are even a lay member, or even if you are a small group leader, or even if you're a youth minister, whatever area, you don't have to be the senior pastor, the lead pastor to bring about change in your church. You can do it, but I would say, I might touch on this a little later as well, but you have to be committed to what God has called you to, and you got to stick through the challenges. Be ready for uh, the questioning, be ready for the misunderstanding, get ready for a lot of things that you're going to have to go through to bring about that change. So with
Mhm.
that said, I'll come back to that later, but we started with a small youth group, and we said, hey, let's prove it that we can work. And it started in our basement, and people from different nationalities amongst the young people, college students, high school students, started coming, and people started making decisions to accept Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. They wanted to grow as a disciple, get baptized, and they didn't have churches to go to. We could keep sending them to other churches. Oh, our church doesn't cater to you. We'll send you here. And we're just like, nah, we can't do that anymore. Our church has to be the one that disciples them.
Mhm.
And we started with the youth group. Then we asked the church to give us a 6-month trial. Actually, we didn't say give us. They said, we'll give you a 6-month trial of starting a second service, which we called community worship service.
Okay.
And that was a service that looked, sounded, felt very different than what we had been doing and had continued to do even while we started this trial service. And we had our first baptisms within the first 6 months. People started coming, people started committing, people started growing, and the church started growing. And then the existing leadership saw, hey, um, the 6 months went by fast, the year went by fast, 6 years went by, and it just kept going. That trial turned into what we are now as a church of, hey, we are a church of people of different cultures, ethnicities, as well as generations.
Yeah, so you actually, I mean, you bring that up. You covered more than just a multi-ethnic. A lot of times we'll set out for one at a time that we want to grow the different ethnicities in our church. We want to hit
Yeah.
different parts of the community, but you were doing it. Not only were you changing the culture of the church, you were changing the average age of your church at the same time. And
Absolutely.
so you had to have a group of people. The quote came to mind a few minutes ago when you were talking about convincing everybody to do it. I was reading in a leadership book this morning. It said leading is getting people to do what they don't want to do and like it.
Yes.
You were convincing. You had to do some convincing about why this is necessary, and because you told me like the church was at the point of no return. It was going to end where it was at, and a lot of people will come to that sense of, hey, we'll just let it die with us and somebody can pick up the pieces and do something else later. But you had some people obviously that saw that need when we were talking before. You said that this was an investment by the church, that they were
Yes.
willing to. Um, and I hear you talking about, they said, we'll give you 6 months, we'll do these. And that's normal. I think sometimes we expect too much from people too quick.
Yes.
um, but they were giving you that chance, and
Mhm.
you said that they invested. Not only did you want to do it, but the church was investing in this. Talk about that a little bit. You were strategic, and once you got that green flag,
Yep.
basically to go, what are some of those events, some of those things that you did to bridge that gap?
Yeah. The main thing was we established a new service on Sunday. So we created a destination for them to come to.
Okay.
Because if we just kept reaching people and having nowhere for them to bring them to,
Hmm.
we could not bring them to our existing traditional service. So I applaud. My father was the senior pastor at that time, um, and I applaud him and the leadership at that time. Excuse me, for having the courage to take a trial run on this.
Right.
Um, but also for him, it was not easy for him. I've tried to put myself in his shoes to put his son in charge of it because that comes with
Hmm.
other thoughts and commentary. But it was not just him; it was the church saw that there was a call, and we said, "Hey, as we have this destination of a service on Sundays now, let's get in the community."
Hmm.
We connected with our local schools. We blessed single mothers that were in the local schools, and for years, a single mother and her children would come to the church, and they got baptized in the church. And we did backpack giveaways, school supply giveaways, and that's grown, and we still do that to this
Hmm.
year. We've done. acts of service and acts of kindness throughout our neighborhood, just going and raking leaves of our neighbors during the fall season here in New York, or just delivering care packages to our neighbors as well. Just fun things around different seasonal things. So it's really been getting our hands and feet into the community, serving the community with kindness, compassion, and love and generosity. We financially partner with local missions partners and groups, but also nationally and internationally. That's grown over the years, obviously, but we started with right there in our neighborhood, show compassion, love, kindness, generosity, and God has blessed it, and we continue to still do it.
You know, I can't get past. I love the whole story of your grandfather coming here
Mm,
and what it started. You know, we always think of missionaries going to other countries and
yep,
going and doing so much, but World Missions brought somebody to America for
yep,
a missionary role. And
yep,
now that church is serving the community and blessing the community, just like we would want a missionary to go there. And it's still doing that 3 generations later. And
yep,
so, man, that's an amazing legacy that you're living out and being a
absolutely,
part of that.
absolutely.
Um, and you're doing it in your community. You're meeting and reaching the people around, trying to see that need. So yeah, that is I don't know, man. I'm just kind of amazed at it. And you said people were just very responsive to it when you were going out. That there was no that you were just breaking down barriers.
Yeah, they were, and when they saw that we were a welcoming church, we may not have looked like them initially, but slowly the congregation started becoming diverse. um, and we didn't target specific groups of people, and I made sure that our congregation leaders that the doors are open. We can't control who comes in, we can't even control who goes out, but whoever God sends, let's pastor them, let's serve them, let's lead them, let's care for them. And God has kind of put his grace on it and blessed it and allowed us to see where this journey has taken us to this very point, where now we have people in our church council leadership, uh, serving teams that are diverse and multi-generational. So that's a prayer that we had from the beginning, something we cast as a vision throughout, and we continue to do. And now, in recent times, we've had guest speakers come in. We have had friends of the church come in at different, and they've testified. Just in recent months, they told me in our private conversations, man, it was so cool to see young kids serving along with adults and the
Mm,
elders still there worshiping together. That multi-generational addict is something they testified about recently, and that's something hard to me, in my heart, sorry, that I hold on to. If you would allow me, many people have advised me to stop certain ministries of our church that minister to our elders and minister to our longtime folks.
mm,
But something, and even I think they were probably nervous when I stepped in and was starting to see, they were starting to see the change coming into the church. But I had to prove myself to them, to say, hey, I'm not
right.
here to replace you. I'm not here to take you out or take anything away from you. We're here to serve you as well. And throughout the years, I believe they've trusted me and I've gained their trust. And now they're like, hey, whatever you want to do, we're behind you.
Yeah. Yeah. That succession is hard sometimes.
It
It's
is.
like you,
It is.
you know, and you told me you're still doing the traditional service that the church has done since its
Hmm.
opening. And
Yes.
and I think, there are some times that you do leave some things behind. I get that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, but I think we forsake the past a lot of times trying to move forward. It's a delicate balance to find
Yep.
there about what you can and can't. And it's one of those things that if you can do it, if it's not pulling away from resources and you're still being a blessing to people, why not?
Exactly. That's it.
If those
That's
people
what
invested in the future, you still got to invest in them.
absolutely. I stand on their shoulders. I'm not without them, right? That's my perspective. But also the aspect of honoring the past, honoring our elders is huge in our community, and it's something that's ingrained in me. I think that may have come from my grandparents, and my parents, and there's only a blessing in it. And if I could speak to the younger pastors and
Hmm.
generations here, uh, if you want to experience a blessing that you can't do anything about, is just honor your elders, honor your past. You don't have to live in it, you don't even have to dwell on the past, but honor them in creative ways, simple ways. And I promise you, the goodwill that you will get from them, the blessing that you will receive from them, but also from the Lord, is exponential.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
Yep.
What was that succession like for you? What was that? What did that look like when you became pastor?
I think so. We started that community worship service that I mentioned earlier in 2011, and I became the senior pastor in 2018. So it was
Hmm.
about that 7 year process of leading a new service, leading a whole, and within that service, we had ministry teams and a whole organizational structure within under that service that I had to lead. And basically, I set it up in a way where that I was looking towards the future. Hey, I can just translate this and almost transition this right onto the into the life of the big church.
Hmm.
Um, and my father came to a point through many conversations, personal, family, but also church leadership conversations. He realized, hey, this is the future. And my prayer and what I shared my heart with him was like, I want him to see the fruit of his labors because
Right.
he gave so many years of sacrificial service to the church, and I want him to see in his this season of life and ministry, hey, God is going to grow this church, God is going to bless this church, and he's going to see and be a part of it as well. So he handled it with grace. He's in our community, from the Indian community, because our church was an Indian church.
Hmm.
He is the first, I believe, to make that kind of move where he let go of his role and his responsibilities and handed it over when he was still healthy and capable of continuing to do so. So for that, I commend him as well.
Look, that brings up a whole other topic that we hear a lot lately
Yes,
is as ministers, and I know we don't always. I know this is off topic what we get into, but that's how these
sure.
conversations go.
Yes.
We don't retire well.
Yeah.
You know, that's
Yep.
something that we struggle with of knowing. I mean, I respect what your dad did to be able to pass it on like that. I think sometimes
Mhm.
we have a tendency to go about 10 years too long,
Yeah.
and everything suffers behind it. That sounds like y'all had a very smooth succession to be able to make that happen, and he's still healthy enough, at that age to be able to enjoy it, to be a part of
Yes.
it, to be blessed by it, like you're saying.
Yep.
And the churches, I see churches a lot of times, and I even showed a graph um, to a leader one time that was talking about leadership and church growth, and we were talking about one that I had used for as an example, and he just looked at it. He said, "Something tells me somebody stayed there about 10 years too long."
Wow.
A lot of times the church will die off during a certain time, and I've been part. A church I grew up in, we had a pastor that he kept prolonging his retirement and prolonging his retirement and prolonging his retirement,
Hmm.
and it just got that the church was kind of slowly fading
Yes.
because of that. And I completely respect him, and I don't want to knock my guys.
Sorry about that.
Haven't had that happen in a podcast before.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. No problem at all.
Yep.
But you know, I don't want to knock and say, guys, you've got to get out and you've got to retire. But knowing when it's time, I hope that when I get to that point that I can have that opportunity. I can have that wisdom and have somebody like you coming up behind to be able to hand the reins off to and pass it. And I know
Yeah.
succession
Absolutely.
plans is something that we're talking a lot about now. And so, not waiting to the last minute to have somebody ready. Um,
Yep.
so I wrote down something a second ago. I wanted to get into it. Um, you were talking about the commitment. You said be committed to where God has called you at that time. You were talking about your role as a youth
Yeah.
pastor and talking about different levels. What does that commitment look like for?
My goodness. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. What does
Yep.
that commitment look like for somebody that said, like you said, a youth pastor right now that's got that great idea? So you've got a perspective because you've done this, right?
Hmm.
How do you approach that leadership in that respectful way of, hey, I see a whole community we can reach over here for that guy that's listening to this right now? Like I said, maybe an executive pastor, maybe a youth pastor, maybe a children's pastor. How do they approach that respectfully and not undermining that leadership of it? Like, what would be your advice to them about how they can do that?
So thank you for that great question. Um, During this time, same time, I was working at an Assemblies of God church. My local church, I was basically volunteer staff, and but we had a family we had to take care of. So
Hmm.
I got to work in that larger, more multi-ethnic church with a huge staff, and I saw those years as um, like David getting to walk through the palace before he became king.
Right.
And I got to learn so much from the senior pastor there, the executive pastor there, the different pastoral staff and leadership there, which gave me so much insight on what can be done differently in my church, but also how you can handle different situations.
Hmm.
And one key thing was, if you want to bring about change and you want to bring an idea to your senior leaders, don't just state the problem that you're facing, but also, hey, here's the problem, but here are a few options or solutions that we can try. That's what leaders are looking for, because leaders get problems all the time. Like, as a senior pastor now, it's and probably for you and many others, you're dealing with problems, crisis, problems, spiritual, emotional, family, church, financial. It's problems. But when you have people that come to you, hey, here's the problem, or I notice you're dealing with this, but here's some solutions.
Hmm.
As a senior pastor, hey man, I'm loving that.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
who I worked for told me that. He sat me down in his chair in his office and said, "Hey, I can get problems all the time, but I need you to bring solutions." And I
Hmm.
grew in that church from assistant to the executive pastor to basically executive pastor without the title, because I was not a member of their church. But those years taught me, when you want to bring about change, bring about the ideas respectfully. Don't expect them to take it right away. Be
Hmm.
okay with hearing a no at first, but don't give up. Keep asking and ask different ways, talk to different people, get insight. Hey, maybe I asked the wrong way, or is there another way to ask this or bring this up again? And I promise you, that will also show that you're committed to it,
Hmm.
right? If I gave up on the idea of starting a new service or starting a new youth group after one attempt, and they said, they'd be like, oh, he was just like trying it out. But
Right.
I kept at it, didn't give up on it, kept at it, kept at it, kept at it. All right, they saw that he's not giving up. Maybe there's something deeper here, and maybe this is a call of God on their life. This is their purpose, and you have to show that you're committed to that call, not just the idea, but committed to the call. The ideas can be different, the
Hmm.
approach and the methods can be different, but you have to be committed to the call of God on your life,
Hmm. I
and they
mean, I
have to
like
see
that.
that commitment.
Yeah, bring some solutions to the table.
You have
You
to.
know,
You
yeah,
have to.
we have a lot of people saying that we're not reaching this community, and we're not doing this, and we're not doing that, and you're not telling me anything I don't know.
Exactly right.
Most of the time when somebody brings that to the leader, he already knows that.
Exactly.
Uh, yeah, but
Yep.
if you not, I'm gonna tell you, if you bring an idea to somebody and you bring a solution,
Yep.
I love how you didn't just say bring an idea. You said you're talking about bring a commitment with it.
Yes.
Be
And
ready to
keep
take
at
it.
it.
Yeah, be ready to
Keep
take it and run with it too.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
can you
even
imagine?
if you don't get, even if you don't get the resources behind it, we had no money for it, for what we
Hmm.
did. We had no money. There was no budget. We just went for it. The investment the church made was, hey, here's time and space.
Right.
That's the investment. Then we had to bring the budget. We had to raise, people gave, and all those kind of things. So even if you don't have the money, are you willing to still do it if you don't have the money?
Yeah. Well,
That's a deep question that I had to deal with.
that was one thing that was coming to my mind when you started this second service. When they gave you the go ahead, you say, "Hey, I want to start reaching this." Is there's a lot that goes into that you're thinking, all right, now I've got to have some people to lead praise and worship. I've got to have
Mhm.
somebody that's going to preach. I've got to all of these different things now. And so the people you brought in, what was that first group? What did that
Oh,
look like? About how many?
it was about 7 or 8 couples, young couples and young families that were part of that youth group in our home.
Hmm.
Uh, we all just they got behind the vision, and they at that time and even later on they continue to say, "Hey, we're standing with you because of the vision you have." So that vision matters.
Hmm.
I think they were all at that stage of life ready to commit to something greater beyond themselves, and they're seeing the fruit of that these years. I just spoke on this about 2 weeks ago at church. We're starting to see the fruit of all the years of hard work and labor just now, like the community coming
Right.
out, church being full, new people coming every week. But that initial group, I go everywhere and I say, hey, I'm grateful for the team that I have. That's something that I started with. Like, it's not going to be a one-man show. It's not going to be a church or a ministry built on a personality. If I'm preaching or not, the church is going to still be strong, healthy, and viable. Um, that team approach was key and essential. And let me just say that to everyone watching now. Yeah, you may have the call, you may have the vision, but make sure you surround yourself with a faithful, committed, loyal team to God, but also to the vision.
Yeah. That's key. But you hit something really, really important just a second ago.
Yep.
Is
Yep.
time. I just
Yes.
read Church Revitalization by Brian Croft, and that was one thing that he really hit on was you have a lot of people that they get this great idea, or they're like us. They come home from General Assembly, and you're around all these people and you're hearing all these ideas. Hey, this worked for this guy and this worked for here, and I'm going to go home and I'm going to implement that, and I want to double my church by Christmas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not
And that doesn't happen.
unless there's a
Uh,
great move of God, there's a special I
yeah,
don't know, but
rarely does that ever
yes,
happen, and
exactly.
or it may happen and it fades away.
So
Um,
as you say that, let me say that it did happen to us like that.
okay.
The early years of that community worship service, we grew quickly,
Mm-hmm.
and then there was a downturn.
Mm-hmm.
And that taught me a lot of lessons. One is don't try to be like other churches, which
Mm-hmm.
I think we were trying to be in those early years. Like, I'm not going to even say names, but the popular churches that you see and hear
Right.
um, locally here in New York, around the country, or even around the world, those global churches,
Mm-hmm.
we try to copy a lot of, and we realize we're not meant to copy other churches or ministries. There's a grace on your church to do specific things well. You may not do everything well, but you'll do specific things well because the grace of God is on that, and just hone in on that and just accentuate that and invest into that. So we went through that downturn, like you said, and then we
Yeah.
learned, hey, let's be ourselves, let's be authentic. And then we saw, all right, then the climb was not as steep, it was gradual.
Right. Yeah, but and it's probably still there. It stays.
Exactly.
It doesn't fade away.
Yep.
We experienced that here. When I first walked in this church, it was a very, very small number. I'll be honest, we had 22 people the first Sunday I walked in.
Wow.
And then by Christmas, that was around Father's Day. By Christmas, we had 96. We were averaging
Wow.
in the 90s. And then COVID hit and went
Yep.
right back to the same number we started with. All of that
Mhm.
new growth just kind of faded away. It was
Yep.
because it was that very fast and rapid. It was our honeymoon period, and everybody was coming to
Yes.
check it out. And
Yep.
and now we're back on that track of growing, but it's sustainable. It's healthy growth. We're baptizing people as they come in. We're seeing those salvations. They're getting involved, and that's
Hmm.
where all of this comes around to church health.
Yes.
And I love the aspect of your version of church health is you saw a dying church. You were there. You were investing in it. This was your home church. Your third generation there, and you came up with an idea of saving it. And that's got to be you got to be bold and courageous to do that. These are um, going that far, uh, multi-ethnic, multi-generational, and doing all that, and being willing to bring that to your group and saying, "Hey, this is how we can keep the church alive."
Yes. Yep.
I'm praying that same spirit over a lot of people.
Amen.
We
And
need a
and you
lot
need
of
to be,
people that are
go ahead. Sorry. I'm sorry.
not saying we need more people that are willing to be that bold to
Yeah.
confront the problem and admit we have a problem. I
Yep.
don't think there's enough people sounding the alarm.
No, we need to. And it's okay to say that we have a problem, but let's
Yeah,
also bring about the solutions that work in each context.
yeah,
This may not work everywhere. You
right.
need to have the right pieces in place, the right people willing to take a chance. It's bold, courageous, and humble. I always
Yeah,
say passing the baton takes humility and courage
right.
uh, from both sides. Like, going back to the succession, it took humility and courage from my dad and his generation, and
Hmm.
humility and courage from our generation to say, "Hey, we're willing to take it, but let's also stay humble about it."
Right.
We're not better than anyone else. We may know a little bit more, or we know different things, but there's also wisdom in the elders. There's wisdom in experience. So being humble and courageous, but also building systems. I'm a systems guy.
Okay.
So we did outreach and all those things, but we also built systems in our church. We did not have systems and processes and administration that could be strong enough to sustain this growth. So then we had to focus on our systems.
So tell me about that. What are some of the first things you implemented?
First things, just making our leadership structure a little bit more efficient,
Hmm.
shifting from what I would say council and uh, board driven type of churches to spiritual pastor led churches with the surrounding wisdom of the council and
Hmm.
leadership of the council. So we redefined roles and responsibilities, really cleaned up our organizational chart. We set up an assimilation process for new people, for them to take the next step with the Lord, but also into the life of the church. Then a discipleship process. So there was two things: grafting them in and then growing them as well. So those are two things. We established what we call the growth track, 4 steps for them to learn about the church, learn about themselves, to learn about how they can serve and use the giftings, and then committing their life to the church and to the Lord as they need. And then with discipleship is just, hey, small groups, community groups, Bible studies, family ministries, kids, youth, adults, men, and then obviously outreach and serving.
Awesome. That's
Yeah,
something those things are hard to set up sometimes. That can get a
it
lot of
is.
kickback trying to switch to small groups
It,
and trying to add all these different things. And that's one of the things I see as trying to revitalize a church is, all right, I've got all these things I've got to implement. You know what I'm saying? I've got it. Everybody tells you I've got to have small groups. I've got to
yeah.
have my next steps. I've got to have, and when your resources are limited, it's hard to narrow that down to what am I going to do first, and getting that buy-in. I know uh, at my church I grew up in, they tried small groups 3 different times, and every time it failed and failed and failed. It never Nobody ever really got bought into it,
Yeah.
and that's because you're giving up your Wednesday night, or you're giving up a Sunday night, or you feel like, and I think this might relate to your, even with yours, because when you go multicultural to the extent that you did, not only are you giving up services, now you're giving up it. Sometimes it might feel like your identity
Hmm.
of who you are, and so you had to ask a lot of people to give up a lot of things. It sounds like, and a lot of pastors are fighting that battle of how do we convince people that you're not giving something up, you're gaining something so much more.
Right. That's right. And they have to feel like, hey, their part in this whole story makes a difference. Like the one that's serving at the door as a greeter or the usher, they're not just serving, or they're not just coming to lead a small group or a Bible study or do children's ministry and become monotonous and routine and burdensome. uh, we have to do even for us, I think we have to do a better job of capturing the story of life change. Hey,
Oh yeah,
because you served, here's the impact it's making on the lives of the people, but also in the life of the church. So that's one thing I'm kind of wrestling with now, is like, how do we capture stories um, and share, hey, because of your service,
hmm
this is what's happening in the life of this family, in this young person, but also in the big life of the church. It matters.
hmm
And then we started shifting a year and a half ago, even from verbiage and terminology. Hey, we don't have volunteers. We're raising a culture of servants of God, and
hmm
putting that mandate on the volunteer who used to be a volunteer. No, you're a servant of God. You're ministering to lives. This is not a charitable service. This is not a social club where you're coming to do volunteer hours. This is, you're serving God. So let's call ourselves servants of God. So even that has been a shift just in the past year and a half, and you could see the mindset change and their service change as well.
Yeah, I like that. Convince them you're not serving, not just serving the church, you're serving God through doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, that's
Yep.
awesome. Man, I've enjoyed this conversation. If you don't mind, take just a minute. I love ending with this and getting into this discussion, but um, talk to that new pastor that, like you said, I know we've talked about it, but sum it up. Just kind of speak to that guy that says, "Hey, I see I see these changes, and I'm a little uncertain about this, and I don't really know what to do, and I'm wanting to get started in this. Just take just a few minutes and just kind of pour into that guy for just a minute, and let him hear your heart if you don't mind.
Appreciate it. Pastor Will, before I do that, let me just say thank you for this opportunity, connect with you and your audience, and you're doing a great job as well. So let's continue to learn from each other and help each other as well. And to answer your question, I would say first, stay committed. I had opportunities to leave our church. Uh, People asked me to go plant a church to reach that new audience that we were trying to reach. But for some reason, the Lord kept impressing on me, you need to be the change agent. You need to be the person that is the catalyst to bring change and be an example for many others. So I hope we are serving that purpose now. And by me sharing into your life, those that are listening and watching, uh, see an opportunity. Don't look at things as challenges, but change your perspective from looking at it as a challenge to an opportunity. Where is the opportunity in this challenge? And then how do I solve that problem? How can I do, and how can I share it? You have to come prepared. Don't just talk out of your mouth. Don't um, just be a talker. Hey, all right, here's the problem, but here I've thought this through with counsel, with wisdom, and it still may need to be refined. But come and share your solutions as well. And I touched on it earlier. You could bring about change without having to be in the position of leading a church or leading a ministry. Come alongside of your leaders and help them look good, look better, be stronger. And if you could show to your leaders that you're loyal and you want what's best for them, and it's not about you, but it's what's best for them and also the vision that they have and for the church, I think the day is coming for you to be recognized, appreciated, but also elevated because of what God has called you to do. So stay submitted, stay loyal, stay committed, and stay faithful. That's my story. Uh, and that's proven to bring the results that we're seeing now. And I look for people like that as well, that I could serve and lead. So as a senior pastor now, I look for those kind of people to say, hey, here are people that are going to bring solutions. They're going to stay committed to you. We don't always have to agree. That's something I want to impress upon everyone. I didn't agree with everything my father did. I'll just call it out. I didn't agree with everything my leaders did and how they did it, but I was not a nuisance to them. I was not a headache to them. I was not a problem for them. I was, hey, all right, that's how you want to do it. That's fine. But with my responsibilities, here it is. And at the end of the day, I always say, you could argue with me. You don't have to like me. You don't have to agree with me, but you cannot argue with results.
Right.
You can't argue with numbers. You can't argue with stories. You can't argue with life change. So all those things are real. You may not like everything that I do or how I do it, but you cannot argue with results, growth, and church revitalization and church health. But you have to say, hey, I'm going to stay committed to this. I'm not going to run. I'm not going to run away. I feel like the Lord is telling me to tell someone, don't run away. Um, Stay where you are, stay planted, and be the change agent where you are planted right now.
Man, that's awesome. Thank you so much, and I believe you've spoken to somebody's life and in their heart this morning.
Yeah.
So many people need to hear that and need to hear that you can get through it and you can impact that change, and in
Yes.
a mighty way, man. I love the story of saving churches. This wasn't one of just, hey, we might, this is a drastic change that you helped
Yes,
lead,
it was.
and God is blessing that part of New York with it. So excited to tell this story. Thank you so much for being willing to come on, and we'll be praying for your ministry and what you're doing there. And
Appreciate it.
excited to keep hearing more about what God's going to do, man. So thank you so much. If you don't know Pastor Cecil, look him up on Facebook. He's got a great ministry going on there. I know he'd be glad to help and pour into your life any way that he can. And so
Absolutely.
thank you so much for tuning in to the podcast today. Looking forward to having some more great episodes with you. Thank you for all your support. We get a lot of good feedback for this. And so it's all about trying to pour into your life, into your ministry, and share the knowledge that's out there. So thank you again for being a part. Pastor Cecil, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.